The room did not erupt when Queen Camilla stepped toward the chair once reserved for Diana. It became completely silent. Every courtier understood what that seat represented, but only Princess Anne reacted without hesitation. As Camilla placed one hand on its gilded frame and declared that it now belonged to the reigning queen, Anne rose, stared directly at her, and walked out, turning a ceremonial gathering into one of the monarchy's most personal confrontations. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles knew the meeting had become dangerous. Senior family members had gathered inside Windsor Castle's grand reception room to plan a national remembrance service, a formal event honoring lives and legacies remembered by the crown. The seating order mattered, because every position signaled rank, closeness, and historical respect. Nothing had been placed casually, and everyone understood that one chair carried a meaning no written rule could explain. William noticed it first. The ivory and gold seat had remained empty during private rehearsals because it had once been associated with Diana, Princess of Wales, whose memory still shaped her sons. It held no constitutional authority, meaning no legal power within the monarchy, yet the family treated it as a protected emotional symbol whenever William or Harry attended. That silence around the chair had become a promise. Camilla broke that promise with one instruction. She told an equerry, a household officer assisting senior royals, to move the seat beside King Charles. Then she declared that, as queen, she would occupy it during the ceremony. The chair scraped across the floor. Anne's jaw tightened. She looked at the seat, then at her brother, giving the king one final chance to intervene. He said nothing. Anne pushed back her chair and left without arguing, shouting, or asking permission. Camilla remained standing, with one hand on the gilded frame, exposed in stunned, wounded silence, before William, Edward, Sophie, senior aides, and the monarch. What she intended as authority became rejection, while Charles's silence deepened her humiliation. The Queen saw permission. His sister saw betrayal. Outside, Anne stopped beside a waiting private secretary and delivered a message for Charles. "Tell my brother I will not attend while that chair is occupied." The words changed everything. This was no emotional outburst. It was a royal ultimatum. Inside, William stared at the moved chair and quietly asked who had authorized the change. Anne's departure shocked the room, but William's carefully chosen question exposed something even more dangerous. The dispute was no longer about where Camilla intended to sit. It was about whose memory the monarchy was willing to erase. To outsiders, it was only a chair. To Anne, it represented a woman whose pain had been witnessed but never fully defended. To Camilla, it represented a permanent barrier between her title and complete acceptance. And, to Diana's sons, it carried memories that no palace protocol could reorganize. The confrontation became explosive, because every person in that room saw something different, and each believed the monarchy's future depended on whether that seat remained untouched. Princess Anne was not known for dramatic exits. She had endured scandals, betrayals, and family crises for decades without allowing emotion to interrupt duty. That was why her departure alarmed Charles and every senior member of the household. Anne did not walk away lightly. When she left, it meant she believed a line had been crossed that silence could no longer protect. Camilla understood the weight of that judgment. She had spent years carrying out royal duties while knowing Diana's memory still shaped public feeling, family loyalty, and every comparison made against her. The disputed chair became the final barrier between the queen she officially was and the woman she wanted the family to accept without hesitation. To her, stepping away would not feel gracious. It would feel like another surrender. Anne stopped in the corridor and pressed her fingertips against the window ledge. The anger faded, replaced by something far more painful. She remembered Diana sitting apart during an earlier Windsor gathering, hiding discomfort behind a controlled smile while others avoided her eyes. Anne had noticed. She had understood more than she admitted. Yet she had done nothing. Inside the room, Camilla finally broke the silence. She asked why every decision involving Diana had to become a judgment on her character. Her voice remained controlled, but the tremor beneath it exposed years of resentment, insecurity, and exhaustion. Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, approached carefully. The trusted confidant advised her to step away before the disagreement became impossible to repair. Camilla refused. Retreating now, she said, would make her appear guilty of stealing something that had never been legally reserved. William remained standing. When an aide invited him to continue the meeting, the prince answered that he would not sit until his mother's chair was returned to its original place. Charles then admitted that Camilla had mentioned moving it closer to him days earlier. The king insisted he believed she meant a temporary rehearsal change, not a permanent claim. Outside, Anne revealed the truth to her private secretary. Diana had once asked her to protect William from watching his mother's place rewritten after her death. She had never spoken of that promise before. That forgotten promise gave Anne's walkout a deeper meaning. But the true cause of the crisis lay in a private ceremony months earlier, when Camilla first attempted to change the symbolism surrounding Diana's place. The Windsor walkout did not begin on the day Anne left the room. Its roots stretched back 6 months, to a private memorial rehearsal when Camilla made a request so sensitive that 3 senior aides refused to carry it out. The matter was buried, the written instruction disappeared from the final program, and Charles believed the tension had passed. But Anne remembered every word, and when the same chair moved across the floor at Windsor, she knew the earlier challenge had returned. The first warning came inside St. George's Chapel, where the family had gathered for a closed rehearsal connected to a remembrance service for deceased royal relatives. The chapel was not simply a place of worship. Within royal life, it was also a setting where family memory, public duty, and ceremonial rank were carefully balanced. Every position mattered, because one small change could carry a meaning far greater than the movement itself. William had quietly approved an empty chair near the side aisle in memory of Diana. A single white rose rested upon it. The gesture was restrained, almost private, allowing the prince to acknowledge his mother without turning grief into spectacle. It asked for no announcement, claimed no official status, and challenged no living member of the family. Yet Camilla saw something different. She walked toward the chair, lifted the rose, and handed it to an aide. Then she asked for the seat to be moved behind the main royal row, arguing that an empty place should not appear to outrank the living queen. 3 senior aides hesitated. None wanted to carry out an instruction that might wound Diana's sons or be interpreted as a deliberate removal of her memory. Anne waited until the chapel had cleared. Then she confronted Camilla privately and without raised voices. Moving the chair, she warned, would not strengthen the queen's position. It would only prove that Diana still had the power to unsettle her. Camilla struck back. She told Anne that the Princess Royal had never been forced to stand beside the ghost of another woman at every ceremony while pretending the comparison caused no pain. Charles entered before the exchange hardened into something worse. The king replaced the white rose himself, but he did not condemn his wife. Instead, he called the incident a misunderstanding and asked both women to move on. The matter should have ended there. It did not. An equerry retained a handwritten seating amendment bearing Camilla's initials. The note directed staff to relocate Diana's chair at future family ceremonies once Charles considered the timing acceptable. Days before the Windsor meeting, a concerned household official showed that document to Anne in a private account of what had been planned. She understood immediately. The chapel dispute had not disappeared. It had merely been delayed until resistance seemed less likely. Anne therefore entered the Windsor gathering prepared. If the chair moved again, she would force her brother to choose openly. When Anne returned to Windsor the following morning, she was no longer reacting to an unexpected insult, she was confronting a decision she believed had been planned in silence for months. Anne did not return to apologize. She entered the king's private drawing room, carrying no papers, accompanied by no aides, and offering no polite explanation for her departure. Camilla was already waiting beside the fireplace, while Charles stood between them, with the strained expression of a man who knew neutrality was no longer possible. The confrontation that followed was quiet, direct, and more devastating than any public argument the palace could have imagined. Charles had summoned both women before the family's morning engagements began. He excluded private secretaries, advisors, and household officials because he believed the dispute had already grown too dangerous for palace procedure. No formal record would soften what had happened. No carefully drafted statement could settle it. The king wanted a family conversation, yet the covered chair still standing in a nearby room proved that this was also a battle over authority. Anne spoke first. She looked directly at Camilla and said, "You did not claim a seat. You claimed the right to decide what Diana means to her sons." The words landed without anger, and that restraint made them harder to dismiss. The Princess Royal was not accusing the Queen of poor judgment alone. She was accusing her of crossing into grief that did not belong to her. Camilla refused to bend. She said she would not spend the rest of her life stepping around objects treated as more sacred than her marriage. Being queen, she insisted, had to carry visible meaning within the family, not merely on official papers. Her title represented the recognized wife of the sovereign, but she believed that recognition became hollow whenever Diana's memory silently outranked her. Anne turned to Charles and asked whether he had approved the claim. The monarch hesitated. That pause was brief, but it was enough. His sister saw the old instinct returning, the need to protect Camilla from humiliation, even when William carried the pain. The door opened before Charles answered. William entered without an aide, and refused to soften his words. The chair, he explained, had never represented precedence, meaning the formal order of rank within royal life. It was a private family gesture, approved after Diana's death, and respected by Queen Elizabeth. Then the prince revealed what Camilla had hoped would remain unspoken. In a documented household instruction preserved by senior staff, the late queen had ordered that Diana's chair should never be removed or repurposed during ceremonies attended by her sons. Camilla fell silent. Her demand now appeared to challenge not only William's grief, but Elizabeth's wishes. Anne delivered her ultimatum. She would return to the remembrance service only when the chair was restored, and Camilla personally assured William it would remain untouched. The queen looked toward Charles, not the prince, and refused to submit to what she called a deliberate attempt to diminish the reigning monarch. With neither woman willing to retreat, the conflict passed into Charles's hands, and for the first time, the king had to decide which carried greater authority: Camilla's crown or the family's promise to Diana. Charles had spent years believing love and duty could be balanced if he waited long enough. Now a single chair had stripped that illusion away. In his private study, the king faced two competing truths. Camilla could not be publicly treated as temporary, yet Diana's memory could not be rearranged without wounding William and dividing the family. When Charles finally reached for his pen, he was not merely settling a seating dispute. He was defining the limits of Camilla's power. The king moved quickly once the confrontation ended. He instructed his private secretary to retrieve previous seating plans, the program from the earlier chapel rehearsal, and the handwritten message left by Queen Elizabeth. A chapel program was the official order setting out where each royal would sit, and what part each person would play during the ceremony. Charles needed more than memory now. He needed proof strong enough to support a decision that would wound someone whatever he chose. His advisors gave him the answer he feared. Diana's chair had no legal or constitutional protection, meaning no rule of the crown required it to remain untouched. Yet protocol was only part of the danger. Moving it against William's wishes could rupture the family, damage trust between father and son, and turn a private grievance into a national symbol of erasure. Charles dismissed everyone and read his mother's message alone. Her instruction was brief. Diana's place should remain undisturbed whenever her sons were present. He folded the note slowly, placed it beside the program, and lowered his pen without speaking. Defending the chair would feel to Camilla like another victory for a woman whose memory still overshadowed her. Allowing the claim would tell William that even grief could be moved aside when it became uncomfortable. Camilla entered before he summoned her. She asked her husband not to reward Anne's walkout or let one dramatic act overrule the Queen's request. If he reversed the decision now, she warned, the entire household would understand that her authority could be broken by family resistance. Charles listened, then answered with painful calm. Being queen did not mean owning every symbol connected to the royal women who came before her. Camilla understood immediately. He had chosen. The king signed a written instruction restoring Diana's chair to its original place, empty and marked by the white rose. He also ordered Anne to return without celebration, criticism, or any gesture that might deepen his wife's humiliation. Camilla removed her hand from the desk and studied the signature. She said she would attend the remembrance service, but she would not stand beside the chair or pretend the decision had left their marriage unchanged. Charles had settled the formal question, but his ruling did not restore peace. It sent Camilla into a ceremony where every glance would remind her that Anne had forced the king to draw a boundary around Diana's memory. The chair returned to its original place before midday, carried by 2 footmen who moved through Windsor's corridors under strict instructions to say nothing. Yet silence could not contain what had happened. Staff noticed Camilla canceling a joint briefing. Edward saw Anne remove her gloves with trembling hands. William stood alone before the restored chair, staring at the white rose. The crisis had been formally resolved, but inside the family, its emotional consequences were only beginning. Charles's written order was carried out without delay. The ivory and gold seat was returned to its previous position, the white rose was placed upon it, and the seating chart was changed under the king's authority. That chart was more than a simple list of chairs. It set the formal order of the royal family during the ceremony, which meant every adjustment carried a message about rank, unity, and respect. Palace aides immediately began controlling the damage. Anne and Camilla were given separate arrival times. The procession order, meaning the sequence in which senior royals would enter, was revised so neither woman would be forced into a public exchange. Staff were also instructed to prevent any moment that might reveal how deeply the family had fractured. Camilla withdrew to her dressing room and removed the brooch chosen for the service. She placed it sharply on the table and told her dresser she would wear something simpler. The queen refused to look as though she were competing with Diana's memory, but the bitterness in her voice showed that the comparison had already taken hold. Edward found Anne alone in a side chamber. He told his sister she had achieved what she wanted. Anne rejected the suggestion immediately. Forcing Charles to defend Diana's place against his own wife was not a victory, she said. It was proof of how far the family had drifted from honesty. William approached the restored chair when no one else was present. The prince touched its frame and whispered that his mother should never have become the cause of another division. His grief carried no triumph, only exhaustion. Then Camilla canceled the family photograph planned after the ceremony. Her absence threatened to turn private pain into a public signal. Charles went to her and asked her to reconsider. She told her husband that his ruling had protected William, but it had also confirmed something devastating. There would always be places in his family where she could serve faithfully, yet never fully belong. A footman later delivered Anne a handwritten note from the king. Charles asked to meet privately after the service, and made one condition clear: their conversation must concern Diana, not Camilla. His sister folded the message and placed it inside her handbag. She understood what was coming. The ceremony would show the world a composed royal family. But afterward, Charles and Anne would meet alone, and the argument over a chair would become a reckoning over decades of silence. After the ceremony, Charles did not summon advisors or ask Camilla to join him. He waited alone in a small Windsor sitting room until Anne entered and closed the door behind her. For the first time since the walkout, neither sibling spoke about rank, protocol, or public appearances. They spoke about Diana as a person, about what they had seen, what they had ignored, and why one empty chair had carried more truth than years of carefully managed royal silence. Charles said nothing at first. No aides stood nearby, no agenda rested between them, and no private secretary waited to turn pain into careful language. A tray of untouched tea sat on the table, making the silence feel even heavier. The king and his sister had both witnessed the collapse of his marriage to Diana, but from very different places. He had lived inside the conflict. Anne had watched from the edge of a family that treated emotional interference as weakness. The monarch finally admitted that he understood why she had walked out. His hesitation during the meeting had repeated an old failure, waiting for discomfort to fade instead of protecting the person already carrying the pain. Anne listened, but her expression did not soften. She told him that silence had not protected anyone. It had only allowed wounds to deepen. Then she confessed her own guilt. The Princess Royal had once believed discipline would help Diana survive royal life. She had mistaken distress for instability, and loneliness for rebellion, because the family had been trained to admire endurance, not vulnerability. Anne now understood that what looked like disorder was often the desperate response of a woman who felt unseen. Charles lowered his eyes as she explained the promise. After one painful family gathering, Diana had privately asked Anne to ensure William never believed loving his mother meant betraying his father. The request had never been recorded or discussed again. Defending the chair was not about defeating Camilla. It was Anne's way of keeping that promise. The king admitted he had considered removing the seat permanently so it could never divide them again. His sister warned him that destroying a symbol would not heal the wound beneath it. It would only hide the truth. Charles then proposed a new agreement. The chair would remain reserved only during private ceremonies attended by Diana's sons. Camilla would never be required to recognize it publicly, and no one would use it to challenge her position as queen. He asked Anne to speak with his wife. She agreed, not to apologize for leaving, but to stop unresolved choices from turning women into rivals. Moments later, she learned Camilla had remained at Windsor. For the monarchy to move beyond the walkout, Anne and Camilla would have to face each other without Charles between them, and decide whether Diana's memory would remain a weapon or become a boundary they could both respect. By the following morning, the palace's silence had failed. One photograph dominated television screens and newspaper stands across Britain. Princess Anne leaving Windsor with her face set in cold resolve, while, through the open doorway behind her, Camilla stood beside the disputed chair. No raised voices were visible, yet the image captured everything: the old wound, the new queen's struggle, and the Princess Royal's refusal to watch Diana's place disappear without resistance. Royal correspondents had not witnessed the private argument, but they had seen enough to understand that something serious had happened. Anne's sudden departure, Camilla's withdrawal from the family photograph, and the last-minute seating changes created a pattern the palace could not explain away. By sunrise, every major broadcaster was asking the same question: what could make the most disciplined woman in the royal family walk out? The official response came quickly. Palace officials called the controversy a private family seating adjustment, and insisted the remembrance ceremony had proceeded with the full support of King Charles and his wife. The phrase was meant to close the story. Instead, it confirmed that a change had taken place, and gave the public even more reason to examine what the chair represented. The London Chronicle captured the mood with a full-page headline, "Anne draws the line." Its photograph showed the Princess Royal entering the Windsor courtyard, while the Queen remained behind her near the doorway. That single image turned a private disagreement into a national argument about grief, rank, and belonging. A national broadcaster pushed the symbolism even further during an evening special outside Buckingham Palace. Two empty studio chairs stood beside the presenter as the dispute was described as a battle over whether memory can hold a place inside a modern monarchy. Some viewers praised Anne for defending Diana and William. Others believed Camilla had been publicly humiliated over an object with no official authority. William watched the coverage at home beside Catherine. The prince lowered the volume and admitted that he had never wanted his mother's memory turned into another contest between royal women. She reminded him that silence had allowed others to define the story, but he still feared that Diana's name was once again being used to deepen division. Camilla faced the same photograph over breakfast. She did not condemn Anne. Instead, the Queen said quietly that the image made her appear as though she had been waiting to take something from a dead woman. Anne refused to let their next conversation become another spectacle. She ordered an aide to clear photographers from the Windsor courtyard before Camilla arrived. When the Queen entered expecting another demand, the Princess Royal moved the disputed chair against the wall and asked her to sit somewhere else. Away from headlines, cameras, and royal advisors, the two women finally confronted what the chair had come to represent, and what each of them would have to surrender to end the crisis. Anne did not apologize for walking out, and Camilla did not apologize for wanting her position recognized. Their final conversation succeeded, because neither woman demanded that the other deny her own pain. In the room where the crisis began, they agreed that Diana's chair would remain empty not as a throne, not as a challenge to the Queen, and not as a permanent accusation. It would remain because some places within a family belong to memory rather than power. Anne chose an ordinary chair opposite Camilla, leaving Diana's reserved seat against the wall. That reserved place was a private family symbol, not an official throne or constitutional position. By removing it from the center of their exchange, the two women stopped fighting over an object and began confronting the pain beneath it. Camilla spoke first. She admitted in their private conversation that touching the chair had been her way of proving she no longer needed permission to belong. The Queen also accepted how the gesture had appeared to William and Anne. She had wanted to affirm her own place, yet to them it looked as though she was trying to replace Diana. Anne listened without interrupting. Then the Princess Royal acknowledged the burden Camilla had carried for years, measured against a woman who died before reconciliation or closure could ever become possible. Protecting Diana's memory, she said, should never require denying Camilla's humanity. Anne refused to erase the boundary, however. Certain family symbols could not simply be absorbed into the Queen's position. Diana's chair belonged emotionally to her sons, and respecting that connection was not an attack on the reigning monarch. Camilla understood the difference at last. The Queen summoned the equerry who had originally moved the chair. An equerry was a household officer who assisted senior royals with ceremonial duties and personal arrangements. In a direct recorded instruction entered into the household log, she ordered that the seat must never be occupied, reassigned, or repositioned without William's approval. The practical dispute was over. Anne then confirmed she would attend future ceremonies beside Camilla whenever duty required it. She would not use the walkout to shame her or encourage public hostility. When Charles entered, his wife told him the matter was settled. His sister added that honesty should never have required a royal exit. Camilla placed the white rose back on the empty chair. Anne gave a restrained nod, and the two women left together. Princess Anne's walkout did not remove Camilla from the royal family, nor did it return Diana to the life she lost. It accomplished something quieter and more lasting, ensuring that one woman's present would no longer be secured by erasing another woman's place in the past. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.